In view of the surge in the corona numbers and the great tension ahead of the US elections, the negotiations over this British Brexit have moved a little into the background. Another ultimatum expired last week. Will there be an agreement before the final date, December 31st? And are there any facts about the early damage caused by the British exit? What would be the consequences of a no deal? This has been speculated since the referendum on Brexit in 2016. It is already a fact that by the end of last year, at the end of 2019, investments were already more than 15% below the average of previous years. But if there's no agreement by December 31st, this will in any case have economic effects on both sides. How have the economic relations been so far? The export of goods and services by the British to the EU have so far been around 14% of the country's economic output. In the case of the EU to the UK, the proportion was only 3%. German companies have not let the long time since the referendum slip by. For example, exports from Germany to the island fell from 7.5 to 5.6% from 2016 until recently. Recently, local companies have noticed the doggedness with which Boris Johnson is driving the tough, uncompromising Brexit. It's like most of the time on the stock exchange. What has long been seen coming is an attempt to anticipate in order to counteract the serious consequences. Shocks always arise from the unexpected, out of the blue, or even from the famous black swan. Of course, a hard Brexit will hit both sides. Some economists expect a decline in trend growth of 1.5% for Great Britain. But will there be no agreements whatsoever in the important financial sector, or in the transport of goods and travel, or even in the drug trade? At the time of Corona, when the Swedish-British pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca could play a decisive role with its vaccine development, in any case, the pandemic comes practically at the wrong time for the UK with its exit plans. The UK has already had a tough time with COVID-19 infections. After first attempting herd immunization, Boris Johnson withdrew in horror when scientists suggested the possible death toll. Despite the change, the nation is currently in the statistics with 894,000 infections and almost 45,000 corona deaths, or with corona, the highest number of victims in Europe. The numbers I used for this script are probably a bit lower than the actual ones when you see this video. I think we're at about 48,000 deaths now. And with that you get a slight hint in the background of my working. Of course, I'm writing tons of scripts for these videos, but if something current appears, those, as I call them, general videos like this one will be shifted back in the timeline a bit, and I publish them when there's not that much current stuff that overturns them. And I really want to publish this one, but I planned it far earlier. But let's continue. This is also reflected in the economic figures of Europe's second largest economy. In the months of April to June, the UK economy collapsed by 20.4% compared to the previous quarter. That was the worst crash since British quarterly statistics began in 1955. The country was thus the bottom of Europe, ahead of Spain, which suffered the negative record with a drop of 18.5%. The corona crisis has thrown the UK back economically to its 2003 level. The pound sterling, once the pride of the British and the oldest still existing currency, has seen a long-term development that could be accelerated significantly by Brexit. Until half of the last century, the pound was the global reserve currency. Half of the world's currency reserves consisted of the British currency, and the Bank of England had a very large influence worldwide. Then the decline began. In the mid-1970s, the British currency only had a share of 4% in global currency reserves, and it has remained so to this day. And the external value of the GDP? The British pound was only €1.10 last week. A good 4 years ago, and the surprising Brexit referendum in June 2016, you had to pay over €1.30 for it. And I remember the time when I was living in the UK. compared to what I paid before in Germany, I really had to pay a lot in the UK. Everything was quite expensive because the pound was really high and my reserves for the move obviously were in euros. Also, a consequence of the eternal hacking around the British government's separate path. Well, the conclusion from the facts so far, it can be concluded that the unregulated Brexit should harm the British more than the EU. But haven't the companies already prepared for the exit scenario in the long period of exit negotiations, and the stock exchanges incorporated the result? When did a foreseeable result really shock investors when they entered it? Excluded individual cases. But does Boris Johnson really want to pull the UK's no-deal exit at all costs, even if the second wave of the pandemic intensifies? Where cooperation is required in Europe, while China's upswing will continue and the USA with its America First policy would not find a weakened Europe so inconvenient? It's usually the external shocks, the thunderstorms out of the blue, that cause trouble. But added to this, there's Boris Johnson's poker. And really, who is not upset by now? And if you now want to know more about European or global politics, YouTube has chosen another of my videos right here for you on the end screen, right next to your chance to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in my next video. Click and enjoy. Viel Spaß!